Hello and welcome to the King Heroes Journey podcast. My name is Beth Martins and I have the great pleasure today of hosting Kelsey Kenny. I'm going to add her to the stage in just a minute. I put up a Rockfin link if anyone prefers to go over there. And if you're new to the King Heroes Journey podcast, this is a place where I love to host those who are willing to speak out, to follow what might be uncommon truths, even in the truth world, if we can call it that, which Steve Falconer says I should not call it a movement anymore, or the world, or whatever it is. And I'm super excited about this conversation because I've been deep into the process of learning toxic bile theory, and I've been having some very interesting experiences with it. I'm not in a place where I can jump up and down yet about it myself because I'm just in the throes of the beginnings. But I believe Kelsey Kenny, who is a nutrition detective herself and a biologist and I believe molecular biologist. We're going to find out more about her and I'm going to bring her on right now. So welcome everyone. Come and say hi in the chat if you're there.
Hello.
Hello. Welcome, Kelsey. So nice to have you here.
Thank you. It's nice to be here.
That's awesome. So I would like to get started by now I got your bio a little bit at the 11th hour last night and I read through and I knew you had like an interesting story, but it was literally remarkable to me to hear what you've been through. And if you'd like to start by just introducing yourself and telling us your story, what's the transformation been over the last 3 years for you and how did you get there?
Well, it started, should I start at the beginning or just the last 3 years?
Start at the beginning because it'd
Okay.
be interesting to see where you've come from and then where you got to.
Okay. All right. So, well, I started out toxic and, most people think that you get a fresh start when you're a baby or you're brand new, but that just isn't so. And Dr. Smith, nutrition detective, he talks about that. When you're jaundiced, when babies are born jaundiced, they're basically in liver failure. So I started out born with liver failure. My mom was a dentist and she carried me pretty much all 9 months working as a dentist too. So I got exposed to that. So, I was a pretty healthy kid. I didn't have, many asthma or allergies. I only got, the few pokies that, were given to millennials. But then I started getting really anemic in high school, and I passed out in ballet class, and they took me to the hospital after that, and excuse me, and they found out that I was severely anemic, and they had to have me hospitalized right away. It turns out I had a condition called severe aplastic anemia. They took a sample of my bone marrow, and I had almost no bone marrow left. And for those of you who don't know, the bone marrow is what makes all of your blood cells, your platelets, your white blood cells, your red blood cells, everything. So I like to joke, although it's not very funny, that I had red Kool-Aid for blood. So it was pretty serious, and I struggled with my health a lot after that. They saved my life, but I never felt the same after that. I was just, I struggled. I was always tired. They gave me a lot of heavy drugs to save my life because I didn't have a bone marrow transplant available. So I never felt right, and I never could figure out what happened because it's such a rare disease. There's only about 2,000 people a year in the United States that get this disease, and fast forward 23 years later, I never found out, and my health was just getting worse. And through those 23 years, I couldn't figure out why I was so tired. I thought I had Lyme disease, Ehlers-Danlos syndrome, multiple autoimmune conditions. Even like there's a sequela of the aplastic anemia that I thought I had and that I was dealing with, and I couldn't get any answers. So it wasn't until I found Dr. Smith's work and made some connections myself that I figured out probably what precipitated the illness when I was 16, which is retin-A micro. I found some documents, and I found some research papers linking them all, and I used what I learned from that, and I figured out that's what probably was the straw on the camel's back that poisoned me enough to do it. And I'm very lucky, because 80% of the time when you get aplastic anemia, they call it idiopathic, and they tell you, well, we don't know how it, what causes it or anything. So that was a real moment of relief when I finally figured that out. So I had been doing flesh niacin before that, and that helped a lot with my health issues. And it wasn't until I discovered Dr. Smith's work, though, that it really kind of came together, and I really got a handle on my health and started feeling better, started getting less toxic. Everything kind of aligned, and I figured it out, what was going on. And yeah, so long story short, I've been I learned the program. I learned how to do the blood tests, the hair tests, and now I'm helping, Dr. Smith and the crew help other people as well. So yeah.
There you go. And we got Dr. Smith in the chat here. Welcome. So great to have you
Hi.
there. Yeah, feeling like family already. I've been in that forum a lot lately. A lot of people have been helping me and contributing to my growing knowledge on this approach as well. And then so what did you notice, say, over those 3 years? What I've come to understand so far is that the first 6 months of shifting into this paradigm, shifting your diet, and just becoming aware of some of those essential nutrients that many of us might lack. How did that 3 years play out for you? Was there times, for example, when things just went kerflooey and you had a lot of, big detox going on, or what was that like?
Well, I'll start with the well, first I was doing niacin for the first year and a half of the past 3 years, and again, that did help a lot. When I found Dr. Smith's stuff, and somebody had posted his links on my Telegram chat, and I first saw him, I'm like, wow, this is all really making sense, because then I was trying to figure out why the niacin wasn't just fixing everything essentially. And I just binged watched all of his stuff basically. And I signed up for the Love Your Liver program pretty quick. It just everything just kind of lit up in my brain and clicked. And then basically I just went to the store and I got the basics. I got the apples, I got oatmeal, beans, meat, and I got started. And a lot of people that I was telling about this at the time, they thought, oh, that's so plain. Like, what about your favorite foods, and what about the herbs and spices and all these different things? Aren't you gonna miss them? And I really didn't. I loved not having the decision fatigue that goes along with figuring out what to eat all the time. So I think I thought it was kind of a relief for me, for not to figuring out, all the time what I was supposed to eat and how I was going to get all this nutrition. And it was just so basic. So I liked it. And I also had less cravings, I believe. We talk about this in the niacin articles that are on the Love Your Liver network. And, also it's discussed quite a bit online in the chats, is that niacin helps relieve a lot of cravings too. A lot of cravings for sweets, chocolate, coffee. This has been reported many times, even alcohol. There's a lot to go into this, but essentially Bill W. of Alcoholics Anonymous wanted this to be kind of the, a big part of AA, or Alcoholics Anonymous. But, he was kind of voted out of that decision. So it's been proven to help alcoholics quit drinking as well. So I just liked it, and I I slowly, okay, so, over that past 18 months or 15 months, whatever it was when I started the diet, I finally started to lose some stubborn weight, which was great. Um, I over time, I did had some setbacks. That's true. I had some retracing. I was struggling with POT syndrome still, which is called postural orthostatic tachycardia syndrome. So that means when you stand up, your heartbeat gets really fast. And I know that doesn't sound that serious, but there's a lot of stuff that goes with that. And basically think of, every time you stand up, your body thinks that a lion is chasing you, even though it's not. So all the stress hormones, all the dysfunction that's going on with that. And those episodes started to fade away. I stopped getting that a lot. My heart rate was started to get normal when I was standing up. So that was really awesome. And I didn't feel the fatigue anymore that was going along with that. So when I was retracing though, or detoxing, I would get episodes of that, or I would get fatigued occasionally, but that started happening less and less. So, a lot of people think when they get on a brand new diet or a juice diet or some kind of trend that they're going to start eating a particular way or get on a certain supplement, and all their problems are just going to go away. And, I'm sure I was looking for that too at some point. And, I tried so many different things over the years, and nothing's really done that for me to think of it. But I started noticing really small changes over time. And Dr. Smith talks about that too. It's like you're not going to start doing this tomorrow and feel absolutely 100% and all your problems are going to go away. Your liver is toxic. You have toxic, things in your tissues. I know that I spent, 38 years becoming toxic, and or 39 years becoming toxic, and it's going to take some time for that to, slowly go down and for me to feel better and check off the problems off of my list. So anyways, so I've noticed that I don't get, symptoms of POTS very often anymore. Um and that was pretty upsetting for me. I lost about 40 pounds on this diet. Um, what else? Better energy, better thinking, better mood, and yeah. And I'm not perfect. There's still some some stuff. I still have some detox, some retasting that happens, and that's okay. And I'm willing to deal with it. I still get sick. I still get a cold, which we tend to think is a large retracing episode, your or detox, an acute detox of your body. Um, so that's where I'm at.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing all of that. Yeah, it's been fun to watch. So one of the things that I read on you that I really appreciate, and I think nearly everybody that I've met in that Love Your Liver forum is a self-experimenter, someone who's a little bit more up in courage, not wanting to turn to someone for every little thing, even if that was possible or productive. And I've done a lot of kind of wild experiments on myself over the years. Many of them, I have to admit, were a fail, right? Like literally going in a wrong direction, holding on to a certain idea, going, I'm a cancer survivor, and just going hard. And one of the things I appreciate so much about this Love Your Liver is that, the most dangerous thing can be what you think is healthy for you, because at least the way I would always take it is like, oh, okay, well, that's healthy. I'm going to, eat a lot of that, or I'm going to take a lot of that supplement or that herb, or do a lot of that activity. And then when it turns out that it's actually, toxic or stopping your body from detoxing, which is what most of those poisons do, then you end up in this, like, oops, kind of situation. And so can you relate to that, being an experimenter, sort of willing to take the risks of what might come as a result of your experiments?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, and I did even worse too for myself. I as I mentioned before, I thought I had Lyme disease. And when you think you have Lyme disease and you read about it and all the scary stuff about it, and you start to get the impression that you have a pretty much almost unkillable bacteria hiding in every cell of your body. It's doing all this stuff for you. It may potentially even be genetically engineered by the powers that be or something, and you think you need to hit this hard. So I was doing stuff I knew wasn't good for me. To be honest, I was doing a lot of prescription antibiotics because I thought that I had to kill this thing before it killed me. And I think that's how they treat cancer sometimes in the conventional sense. So that was a big part of how I wrecked myself. Of course, I did a lot of herbs too, and things I shouldn't have done. And there was the brief, thinking that I had a lot of parasites too, and that was my problem. That's another, common rabbit hole that people tend to go down. So yeah, I did mess myself up, and not only doing things that I thought were healthy, but things that I knew weren't healthy. But I thought I had no other choice.
Right. That kill or be killed programming is so sticky. That's the one, right? Where we feel like we've got an enemy in our system. And I've been playing with that so much in the field of identification. I won't go off into that rabbit hole now. That's kind of a big one. But I do actually want to, since you mentioned parasites, that is such a common, like you said, rabbit hole, and people get lost in that. And I think it was you I heard talking about that maybe on the how do we talk in code? We're on censorable platforms here, so it's like IV. You know what I'm talking about? There's a drug
Yes.
with that. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, and that's related to this whole world of parasites. Well, where did our obsession with parasites in the so-called natural world originate?
Well, I believe it originated actually in the 20s, and people get surprised when I say that. And I believe it originated with the Rockefellers. And I go over this with my presentation I did with Dr. Smith, called the IV quote unquote double cross scam. You can if anybody if you want to post the link, maybe I can do that, or we can add it to the chat later. Um, they started with hookworm actually in the South. So they noticed that people were anemic. They were uh their teeth were falling out, they looked sick, and they were skinny, and they were very poor. They were working in the cotton fields, and the Rockefellers and their ilk kind of came in and told everybody that they had hookworm. um so and they even, they talked about this. They even brought doctors in that were, convinced doctors that were of their ilk, of the, other Southerners, to convince these people that their problem was that they had a parasite that basically, went into their foot because they were walking around backwards and took over their whole body. And the website that talks about this even kind of brags that this was kind of a model for health programs in the entire United States. Um, and across the world, basically. So they think this was a really good thing that the Rockefellers did, and this was and the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers did, but it's not. And people talk about, oh, Rockefeller medicine and allopathic medicine, and people just don't understand that they were responsible for the origination of this, treating people for parasites. And there's and those type of people and their their spawn are still doing this today in Africa, pretending to help people by treating their parasites when it isn't the root cause. Basically, to sum up, what was wrong with the people in the South is they were poor, they were putting new pesticides onto the cotton crops, and they were getting sick from it. And if they found parasites on those early microscopes, those were just basic. That's what happens: is parasites eat dead tissue for you. I'm not saying like they're a good thing, but that's what's going to happen. They're not going to be there if you're not poisoned, basically. So that's where and it's still going on today, but people think that they're being rebellious by treating parasites, and big pharma isn't going to tell you to treat your parasites. All the while, they have people taking a pharma to treat parasites. So you're not sticking it to big pharma when you do this. They make a lot of money, even though it's off patent. This drug has been around for over 40 years. It's forms of it are sprayed on all of our crops. They've been given to feed animals for 40 years. And so we've all been basically dosed with this IV drug over those years, and it didn't prevent anything. Chronic illness has only gone up. And if this were the quote unquote wonder drug they said it is, shouldn't we all be perfectly healthy based on the quantity that this drug has been administered? And why is Bill Gates behind this drug in Africa as well? So, these are questions that seem obvious when you kind of piece it together and understand what's going on, but the brainwashing has been especially difficult to crack for a lot of people when it comes to this particular medication or the parasite theory at large. It's been very difficult, and it's been very saddening to see a lot of people poison themselves going down this particular rabbit hole. Yeah.
I agree totally. I intuitively turned away from it. My first thought was, why are you promoting a pharmaceutical? Why? Like,
Yeah.
what makes you all of a sudden trust? There's many examples of that, and I was just noticing how one of the tools that can be used for for the supporting life and also for supporting death is to polarize people, and so. Is that what historically happened? I know you can't say beyond a shadow of a doubt, but just that, the onslaught of all of the drug form of medicine, pharma medicine, must have polarized some people to think about, well, isn't there a natural way that we can heal and do these things? And knowing that about us, that there's always going to be those that are for and those that are against in that polarity. So they created a whole world for the rest of them that wanted more quote unquote natural or alternative kind of cures. Would you agree with that? Or
Oh,
anything?
absolutely. Yeah, there was a total polarization of us. They I talk about this in the thing, but they used, a lot of psychological techniques to do this and to instill it in people. One thing they did is to I'll just call it red and blue. Okay, so and I think people know what I'm talking about there. But people on the red side saw a lot of silly things happen, a lot of supposed incompetence, and that created a lot of resistance in our mind. Well, I don't want to be like those blue people. They're crazy. They just want to stick everybody with pokies. So when that alternative was kind of snuck in there and whispered about, we felt like we were being the rebels. We felt like we don't want to be like those other guys. Those people are crazy. We want to do the rational thing. Why won't somebody do something? If only we had this IV, then everything could go back to normal and everything could open up again and grandma can get out of the hospital. And when you think about it, gosh, doesn't that sound like what somebody on the blue team would say? If we could only have these pokies in people's arms, we could be free and we can open everything up and grandma could get out of the hospital. So when you look at the parallels of that and what they did, it was genius. It was evil genius, and I'm still stunned at the audacity and that it worked, and that people are still so polarized, so very polarized. And we just had an election too, and we had people on the red team still go for the red guy, team red. And after what he did, and after putting out those pokies and still bragging about it today, it's just unbelievable. I can't think about it too much, because it's just it's like it's like living in clown world, essentially. It just boggles the mind. So
Mhm.
I don't remember what the original question was. That's how I feel about that.
Yeah, no, just about the polarizing, and that's something I started to notice early on, just to congratulate myself, that whether it was, about some other freedom related thing or whatever, but you could hear if there's narrative, it was actually the same on both sides. So at one point there was like, we have to, unify everybody in the world. This is, say more the blue team, and, we're all the same and we want peace and love, and that flavor of the narrative. And then on so-called our side, which I was identifying with at the time, it was like, oh, we need to unify and all get together and have the same message and the same everything, right? So he's like, oh my, and then I'm going like, oh my goodness, it's the same. Doesn't anybody see this? I'm looking around like, but it really appeared to be something different and good to them. So yeah, it just worked like anything. Yeah, that was so good. I also the whole parasite movement thing, I just kept on like, no, it was a no in my head. And no, there was one time when it got me and I thought, oh, it turns out I have parasites. Uh, and one of the things that I've learned, and I'm wondering if you also, I haven't heard about this in the Love Your Liver at all or anything from Dr. Garrett, but do you subscribe to a pleomorphic model of biology? Given all of you're a trained molecular biologist, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And so have you, and do you know that word pleomorphism?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think I am close to that. I'm not entirely there. A lot of about it makes sense. Um, I, you know, a few years ago, of course, I thought I had this unkillable bacteria, and and then and then I saw that thing about parasites and how if people let's use the example of IV in Africa. So Bill Gates essentially and the WHO give this IV to Africans, right? But before that, they were given toxic pokies and they sprayed a lot of pesticides in the name of pest control and mosquito control and to help prevent this, and they started getting sick. And then they're given antibiotics, and then they're given injections that kill their gut bacteria. So one of the things that gut bacteria do for us is they help us. It's like a kiss curse thing. They help us stay upright. Now there's a lot of bad things that go on, but at least they help us survive in a way, and the body will tolerate them. So once they've killed off these people's beneficial gut microbiome with all this poison, and the parasites show up and are eating the dead tissue and are kind of recycling niacin for them, essentially turning nicotinamide into niacin, which you need a certain amount just to stay upright. And I have research on this too, but I won't completely go into it. Or they're mopping up some of the toxic metals for these people, or they're eating some of the dead tissue, and and then parasites show up. Now I don't I don't know if they're just in the water or they're eggs or anything, but somehow these show up when people kill off their gut bacteria and when people get really toxic. Um and I don't know. I'm not all the way there, but I understand kind of the progression that happens with this, and it could be pleomorphism where species are changing based on the environment, these species of microbes. One thing that I'm not quite sure of is like, food poisoning, like when you get salmonella or something and you eat this bacteria, and that supposedly only takes 5 of them, like 5 individual bacteria for you to possibly get salmonella poisoning. Or when people take probiotics too, that's another thing that kind of confuses me. It's like, pleomorphism kind of dives into contagion theory, and some people are even against contagion theory. And I'm thinking, okay, so people take probiotics, right, to supposedly, but they're good for you and to colonize your gut, but at the same time they're saying that a bad bacteria can't be swallowed somehow and then colonize your gut and have you know a bad effect. So I'm not entirely there, but I and I don't really want to make up my mind fully about what's going on, but I'm almost there essentially. I see kind of what's going on, and that a lot of times only these these bad bacteria will only be able to exist in your body if you are toxic. Like maybe I did have Lyme disease at some point, but it can't exist in my body anymore because I've cleaned up enough, I feel like. So that's where I'm at on that. I didn't really quite answer the question fully, but I think you get my gist. I'm kind of undecided.
It's perfect. And I think it's really good to just keep your mind open to learning more things, because as soon as you're 100% certain in any direction, you've closed off that new information could come in, or you've made it really difficult. It's one of the things that I value about you and Dr. Smith, and you know, I can see you're all fast learners. And there's things, say, I was looking at a comment in the forum yesterday, and it was saying something against niacin, but I know that niacin now has come forward in your research, and it's something that that is being played with. I started using it myself, having what seemed to be some nice results already. And so, yeah, the uncertainty, it just has to be in the mix. It's archetypal. It's the masculine and the feminine. The masculine's fully certain, and the feminine is not. So there's always those two things, which I personally appreciate more, reflecting reality than just holding a position from our ego, for example. So I appreciate that very much. I'd like to back up a little bit. I've got a lot more questions on the health stuff, but I'm just curious about your evolution from the into this paradigm. So the Love Your Liver paradigm of eating is, it's a framework. It's not a protocol, which I appreciate very much. Again, it makes you the scientist, but to go from our natural and alternative paradigm that has been nearly my whole adult life, especially since having cancer, and before that too, I'd already started to adopt that. What was the transition like to this, if we could just keep calling it the Love Your Liver paradigm?
Okay,
Or did
well,
you not start in the natural side of things?
I did. I was doing a lot of things natural, and I raised my babies pokey free, and I was pretty much a granola mom. So I was already enough away from, some of my schooling, and with that, of course, because in college I thought that pokies were necessary. Um, and I was starting to come to this conclusion on my own too, through my health journey, is that the killing stuff paradigm does not work. You can't just be killing stuff. That's a big one. That's a surefire way to poison yourself, is to think that something's you know unfixable, and you have to take this poison, or this is going to get you. That's kind of the whole fear operation. You're contaminated, that the powers that be, I'll just call them that, really ran with. So that was something I had to overcome, and to get out of that mindset. I also had to overcome the mindset that I just had to find this one thing, this one supplement, this one nutrient that I was missing, and then I was going to be okay, and I was going to be feeling 100% better again. I had to get out of the so I had to get over the fact that I was looking for a quick fix and something to make me feel all better. Um, because I didn't have answers. I went to tons of doctors and functional medicine doctors and spent a lot of money on gadgets and supplements and everything. So I had to get out of that. I was kind of doing the almost shotgun approach with things. I was taking handfuls of supplements, like Dave Asprey, or that Brian Johnson guy, thinking that one of these has got to be the thing that's going to fix me. And I slowly came out of that, and I damaged myself even further, because I know how to read research papers, or I thought I did. So I was reading a lot of research papers the wrong way, though. There's a lot of research papers are fake, yes, but there's still some truths. There's still some nuggets that you can suss out. It's very much an interpretive thing, and interpreting the results. Like, let's say you put a compound on a dish of cancer cells, right? And it kills the cancer cells. Okay, it cures cancer. Nope. No, it does not. It was a poison, so it killed those cancer cells. It doesn't mean it doesn't also poison you. Maybe, not as quickly as these cancer cells that are already stressed out and everything, but it's essentially a poison when it does that. And I didn't quite understand that concept. Um, and I was slow. It wasn't a fast change, and I was slowly starting to realize this. And when I was talking about ivermectin, because I kind of took up the mantle of talking. I'm sorry, I said the word. I was talking about IV and listing research when I found out that was bad for you. Um, and I started to realize also that a lot of things that they were telling us were healthy were not. A lot of herbs are essentially pesticides that the plant makes that to deter pests, um, or like garlic. People think that's so healthy for you, and it's actually not. So I was starting to get into it, and then when I saw Dr. Smith's stuff, I'd already um, eliminated a lot of things like garlic and herbs and everything, and stopped taking those. And then when I found Dr. Smith's stuff, then it really hit home for me, and I learned about vitamin A and the other stuff that's supposedly healthy, but really can be quite detrimental. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah, it's good to say it like you said it, that herbs are pesticides. You think about it, because every herb is so defenseless, they can't do anything. If an animal comes to, chew them up, all they've got is their poison. They can't run, they can't bite, they can't kick and cry out. So yeah, I was the oh my goodness, how many times I tried to smash symptoms with especially garlic. I was just the queen of garlic. I at times when things would start erupting and I'd feel like, a virus coming on, whatever. I shouldn't say that word either. But I would just start taking copious amounts of garlic. And not surprising, I would need more and more and more of it to crush those symptoms. And sometimes it would be like, I always had the threat that, oh, this is just going to get like completely out of control if I don't do anything. It's going to overtake and kill me. And then, I finally could see the writing on the wall. And it's been fascinating to go through a few now, like what you're talking about, retracing. Maybe I'll get you to define that. And then just feeling like, oh yeah, part of me thinks this is going to get out of control, and that's fear. And this is my subject, to deprogram fear. So I've been able to use that. And I notice how the symptoms are, they come up and then they go down, and then they might come up again, and then they go down without all of the vitamin C and you name it, whatever I was throwing at it. So that was really fun to see how I took away all my so-called defenses, and I was not only not dead on the floor, but starting to experience right from the get-go, more energy, easier mornings, overall less detox. But I don't want to mislead people to think this is panacea, because it's, at least in the short term, it's definitely some work. But yeah, good, very good point. Back to the research, and I noticed that there's a whole lot of PubMed articles that show up on Dr. Garrett's or Dr. Smith's live streams. And I'm actually so grateful for those, because he's reading often line for line and interpreting as we go, like telling you what the strange words mean. And there's a word they use for, what is the word they use for poison, or for, like, there's words they won't use it, but if that's how they're using it, then yeah. So I'm just glad to hear it's not like hook, line, and sinker with the whole research papers, but what does that take in you to be able to pull out the useful truth?
Um, I think I'm really lucky, and again, I said I knew how to read a research paper. I thought back in college. Obviously, I went through a lot of them. I even contributed to a few. Um, but but you have to know how to read that. You have to know how to pick up the truth, and it's something that I think is difficult to teach unless that's something you've been experienced. And then there's the whole other lens of reading them correctly. So you can understand what the jargon means and the definitions and the terms, but to not get what the point of the study was, to not get what's actually happening, to see the forest through the trees, basically, then people can lead themselves down a very rough path. Well, let's take methylene blue. I think we can still say that online without getting censored, but there is some research on there that looks kind of good for that compound. There's even some research that will look good to people who don't read research papers and know nothing about them, that will make you think IV is a wonder drug. It kills cancer, it does this, they even tell people go search on PubMed, and people who don't know this should not be looking up PubMed, because they will mess themselves up just like I did, even worse probably. And they tell people go and search ivermectin in cancer in PubMed, and you'll get 15,000 results. And people will just read the titles and be like, wow, this is a wonder drug, right? They don't kind of have that base skill to read them and then also to interpret them. So that's what I loved about watching Dr. Smith's live streams. I had never seen anybody do this before, to actually put the research on the screen and to go for it live. And like you said, you already described it pretty well. And I thought that was amazing. And I thought that was great. And how he was explaining it. And you can't say that he's misinterpreting it or he's cherry picking or anything, because you can read it yourself. It's right there. Versus some of these other guys, I'll use Dr. Brian Artis as an example, who promotes nicotine for all sorts of things. And he refers to papers, he talks about them. He doesn't actually really list them, except for on occasion. And he can talk for hours and hours about this. Oh, well, this study did this, and this study did this, and stink venom and all that. And I had to really search to find what he was supposedly talking about. And and finally I found a PowerPoint presentation for what he was talking about for most of his appearances. And I clicked on the actual study. I got the actual paper, and it was actually saying the very opposite of what he was saying it did. This was the first study on there where he claimed that nicotine did this certain thing to the nicotinic acetylcholine receptors. It actually did the very opposite. So right there. So it's just below the surface, and the layman, the average viewer, is not going to understand this, and they're going to think that just spouting off what happened in this paper or that paper, or like Ray Peat, for example, just referring to some study or this or that. And when you actually look at it, that's nothing. That's not evidence. But Dr. Smith actually puts those papers on there for people to read themselves. He defines the words so they're not, gatekeeped at that point. And then he tells you also how to interpret them. I mean, if you want, if you grok what he's saying, and you're getting the toxic bile theory, but even if you disagree, you can go ahead and read the research papers yourself, and form your own arguments if you think he's wrong. But it's right there on the screen. He even gives you the link. So I thought that was pretty unique and amazing, what he does with that.
Totally. Yeah. At the beginning, I'm barely hanging on by my fingernails, and now I notice I have a lot more bandwidth to go and pay close attention and listen to every word, and start learning. Like these are in the research papers for words they use to hide saying toxicity or homeostasis and signaling. So right, like who would know that? You can see it though. Once he explains it, you can totally see that that's what they're talking about. So yeah, it's really great to have a few giants to stand on the shoulders of there.
Yeah, and can I say one more thing about that too? Is that so when people are putting a poison on cancer cells, and there's a lot of cancer research for this compound or that compound, and there's even herbs and stuff that they do sometimes. I've always wondered why there's so much research on herbs. Like, who's funding those really? It turns out, big pharma starts with herbs, and then they select a compound, and then they go from there. So that's why there's so much research on herbs, basically. But anyways, so what they'll do too, and of course, I was a victim of this as well, but is they'll put a poison on there and they'll tell you exactly how they poisoned the cell and exactly what biochemical changes and this P53 enzyme complex and this cell signaling and cell cycle arrest and apoptosis or apoptosis. I still don't know how to pronounce it. I've heard it both ways, but basically a cell dying or killing itself. Um, and they'll use all this scientific jargon and this gene and that gene about what's going on. But at the end of the day, the cell got poisoned, and you can put all these fancy terms for it for exactly how it got poisoned, but it still got poisoned. And that's where people get in the weeds with a lot of this research too, is that a lot of those terms don't even matter, even if you did define it. I could put rock salt on cancer cells, it'll kill them. I can put IV on cancer cells, it'll kill them. I could put arsenic, even all these different things. At the end of the day, it's still poison, even if it's fancy, even if it's got some, fancy, huge molecule or something. At the end of the day, it's still poison. It doesn't matter all these processes of exactly the postmortem of how these cells died. At the end of the day, they died, and cancer is your tissue. It's a survival strategy. It's a storage compartment for toxins that have enhanced detox capabilities. That's sometimes why they can be harder to kill in some occasions.
Exactly.
And so heterogeneous as far as how they present themselves. So
There you go. We might have to use the C word too, by the way. That one's a little
oh, okay,
trigger.
good.
That's
Didn't
okay.
know that.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha.
No worries. We have to talk like morons over here to get our message across. But so, with those two fields of your academics, obviously very mainstream, very defined by this history of the powers that ought not be coming down, and so was there ever a time where you felt like, oh my goodness, I know too much, and how am I going to, or was your education well behind you by the time you started speaking freely in public? I've only seen the interviews on, or the videos that you've done on Garrett's channel, but how did you get motivated to speak out, I think is the main question.
um I didn't want people to go through what I went through, essentially. And when I found a really good thing, it wasn't the only thing, of course, but when I found out about flesh niacin and I started really diving into that and figuring out what was going on with that, I really wanted people to know about it and all the great benefits that happened, especially for my son too. It really was a full transformation. I'm not a full transformation, but it was a huge shift in him and his health, that happened with that. And I just wanted to share. And I I always felt protected. I guess I didn't really feel scared or anything about that. I happened to know kind of certain people, and got on certain interviews, and I guess people wanted to hear me what I had to say about it with my background. Also, when I was in school, I worked with mRNA, if I can say that. I don't know. I worked with the stuff that they claim is in the pokies. So I thought I knew some about that. And early on, I was telling all my family, I'm like, this didn't work in the lab. It's not going to work here, assuming that's what it was. Um, so no, I always felt like cared for and not worried. And if they're going to put me in a camp later, at least maybe they'll get rid of me first. I won't have to stay a long time. They're going to be like, oh, this one, we can't help this one, this one's not going to be a good citizen. That's it, right? I don't have to have a long stay there. So I was never really afraid. I just figured if I was doing the right thing, that I would be, and I was aligned with what I was supposed to do and my mission, that I would be okay and I would be protected. I also had a huge spiritual experience about like 5 years ago too, that kind of put a lot of destiny in me, I guess. It just gave me a huge sense of purpose and what I was supposed to do, and everything kind of lit up and clicked. So yeah. So to answer your question, once in a while I get worried, but overall I feel pretty safe in the truth, and that what I'm doing is the right thing to do.
Nice. Yeah, it's a lot safer in the truth. I totally agree. There can be repercussions for people. I'm actually inspired to read a paragraph out of your bio. She says, my life's work now makes sense. My degree in cell and molecular biology and my experience in biotech fields I pursued over art school in an effort to understand my rare disease finally have a proper application. I can now help myself and others heal, which is a source of immense pride and, as you just said, purpose. So that's my subject. That's the most amazing thing, and it does. The reason I wanted to talk about this is I always have a secret agenda, hoping to inspire people to speak out, to say. When knowledge comes to you, not just facts and information, but lived wisdom and experience, that people really need to hear that. And yes, it can be there can be some backlash. I have experienced all kinds of it myself, but in the end, it's really, really worth it. So good on you.
Thank you. Yeah,
Yeah.
I feel like, of course, it's not without downsides. There's been a little, but it's been nothing, and it hasn't shaken my sense of inner peace. I guess when I have this purpose, when I have this bedrock foundation of I'm safe, I'm protected, I feel like I'm on the right path, or I am consciously trying to stay aligned and stay on that right path. Yeah.
Amen. There you go. There you go. So you're highly educated. I notice that people around this world tend to be, have their wits about them. And do you what do you think about like the average person? Even as I ask this question, I'm realizing that maybe the average person isn't even really reachable by this point. So you're not like trying to get this out to the masses and bang on the health care's door trying to make them change their ways or anything like that. But to the degree that it takes a kind of a sciencey mind, and here's one thing that I've noticed. I had to get past my resistance, and I have, but it was a thing where I would always work with my health more intuitively. So from day to day, I'm not exactly measuring my supplements, or I'm not like tracking every little response to everything. And I got myself a milligram scale to weigh out amounts of things that I couldn't tolerate in the full amount of a capsule, for example, and realizing that, okay, yeah, I got to start really small and become like, so that word in the financial world, being a quant, someone who is the opposite of the mad scientist that I've been. Do you think it's really a necessary step to take to become quantitative in your health?
No, not for everybody. I think people can. Some people would prefer a consult and be told, do this and slowly ramp up to this, and we'll gently guide them. And some people may even want to do milligrams of things if they're that toxic. I know, for example, that I've heard from a few people. Well, just one person, I think, about this particular issue, but they even have a little bit of lactoferrin, and they will like not even a smidgen, like not even a 64th of a teaspoon, and they can need to nap the whole day. And then on the other spectrum, you have what we lovingly call sledgehammers. Like, they can take big doses of things and not really feel much of a difference. So you have to kind of allow for both styles of healing. And then there are people that are very intuitive, like my colleague Hope is very intuitive, and a lot of things you could almost say she's also a bit of a mad scientist, but so am I sometimes. But she does some things that are kind of wow, okay. And it works out for her. So we allow for all of that, and it's still kind of, this Love Your Liver program is still kind of in its early stages, where we are attracting very curious people who don't just want to be told what to do, and that want to understand the concepts. And it that, you know, as we get bigger, we may have people that just want to be told what to do, or that will get frustrated, or don't want to put in the work or the reading. um like for now, this I think this is still kind of on the same subject, but some people will come into the program and try to bring in, well, why doesn't Dr. Smith use this? You know, substance A. This has all this research, and I think it fits into, you know, this part of what he says, and this and that. And Dr. Smith will kind of jokingly say, like, everybody comes in here thinking that they're going to add something new, and it turns out to be, a lead balloon essentially. And he will, if it gets out of hand, you know, he'll have to make a comment about it. Like, for instance, this thought virus I'm sorry, this how should I say this?
I think
This
that's
kind of
just fine. Yeah, I get it.
Okay. This thought virus kind of came into the Love Your Liver program, and my chat about dextrose, which is a type of sugar. It's glucose essentially, and it's made from corn. When you get it in supplement form and everything, and that kind of got into it, and that didn't work out, and we kind of proved why that was not a good thing. But okay, back to what I was saying. People come in here and they think that they have the magic key that's going to make this all fit and everything, and it's going to heal them quicker and make detox go faster. And what I tell people is sometimes, yes, when they bring up new stuff to me too, or new compounds, or this fatty acid, and I'll say to them, you're right. Something is missing from the Love Your Liver program. And I can understand why you think that. There's absolutely something missing, but you're not going to like my answer. Do you know what it is? It's your time and your energy and your effort. That's what's still missing. That's what you still need to be putting in. It's not adding a new compound. It's not, this or that. And I'm not saying the Love Your Liver program is absolutely perfect, but I've never seen anything to my knowledge that has filled in so many gaps and put so many pieces together like Dr. Smith has with his paradigm here, and made so much sense. He has all the pieces of the proverbial elephant, I think, or almost all of them. Maybe we could add some more spiritual stuff and mental healing as well too, because I think that can still be an issue that people need to address a lot of times in their healing. Excuse me, I'm just having some water.
Yeah, a minute.
So yeah. So essentially that's what's missing, and that's what you need to put in if you're going to be a part of this program.
Exactly. Yeah, there's no way. I saw the writing on the wall, and it not that I'm a stranger to it. I've been working on my own health for a long time, and but this was a new layer of resistance I had to get past, and there was a point where I thought, you know what, I'm not going to be able to do this on my own. And I did sign up for a consult with you, by the way. I don't know if you know that. But do you think that people could be successful without the consultations, or have you seen testimonials from people who weren't working directly with you, weren't testing?
Yes, people can be successful with that. A lot of people have seen some really benefits just by listening to his free live streams, Dr. Smith's free live streams. Some people say, well, there's always the G word that goes around, grifter, you're just trying to make money and everything. And a lot of people, I've seen so many people experience benefits that haven't even signed up for the program, that just listen to live streams. I have a few Telegram chats where people talk about this and watch his shows, and they're not even Love Your Liver programs, but they'll report that, oh, Dr. Smith said to do this, or Dr. Smith talked about this, and it's working. And so yes, people do get better. People get better by doing it yourself in the Love Your Liver program. I think that for the price, $99, that is the best health value that people can get. Less than $10 a month, and this wealth of information that Dr. Smith has put together over the years. And I've also contributed my little piece about the flush niacin with my articles. But people can do it themselves. The principles still apply. If they prefer to get a little more guidance, and they want to know kind of exactly where they are with their toxicity and their hair and their blood and where they're starting off from. That's great if that appeals to them. If it helps for them to be told how much to take in the starting dose or the max dose, that's good. And sometimes, like, if they have maybe there's a toxic metal that they don't know that we're being exposed to, and Dr. Smith and I have figured out a lot of that too, and a lot of the different sources that maybe people didn't look at, like their well water, or maybe they worked with a lot of wood, and that can be manganese poisoning. So there's a few little things. So some people might be on the Love Your Liver program for a little while and choose to do a consultation, not because they're not having results, but maybe they just want to get a little bit more specific, have a little bit more navigation and direction on where they're starting out from and where they need to go, and if there's also any hidden factors that they're not seeing that might be slowing down their health journey.
Right. Oh, that's really good. And yeah, I mean, I've had a good experience in that training. My only complaint with the Love Your Liver forum, the information is there. It's easy to access. It's got a very good search bar, so I can, for the most part, you just using the search bar if I want to go and see something specific. There is some material that is outdated because you guys are learning so fast, but one of the all-time best features is that you can jump on the forum and say, like, hey, I'm going through this, or hey, I got this product and not sure how to use it or what to expect. And people just flood in with their experience. And I've had a few shout out to you guys that have private messaged with me and taught me how to, make my own zinc cream, because everything on the market has some kind of poison in it. So yeah, I've really appreciated that. And do you find that say you personally, or some people have been on a path where it's all about the testing, like testing and retesting and retesting and retesting? And one of the reasons I say it is because it looks like here in Canada, I cannot get the tests. I spoke to a physician about it in the family, and they literally can't order most of the tests that you're recommending.
Wow. Well, we were trained, just so you know, we were trained to do it with just a hair test as well, or so you might not be getting. It's not the it's not exactly the most important thing. So it's okay. We can still help you, but yeah, you don't want to get into that cycle, like I was doing when I was really sick, of testing for mold, viruses, bacteria, and testing my blood constantly. And I think this is so crazy, but I can't believe how many times I've had a complete metabolic panel and have it, and think that my liver was just fine when my liver was crying out for help the whole time. So we use specific tests, and we use very few blood tests because we know what's important. And one thing that Dr. Smith says that people should understand is that if the treatment isn't going to change, if your course isn't going to change, based on the results of the test, then why are you doing that test? And it's a very good question that a physician needs to ask themselves, or a health practitioner. Why are we doing this? Or are we just spending money? Or are we just getting into the weeds of something? Because I took all those tests and the blood tests over the years, and I've had so much blood drained because I had this, blood disorder supposedly, but it actually started in my liver. Um, that I just started seeing, like, what's the point? How is this getting me better? How is knowing I have all this Epstein Barr, like, helping me? And I was racking up so many conditions based on all these tests. And one day I got a piece of paper, and I did the math. I did, like, fractions, right? So how many people get PNH, let's say, or aplastic anemia? And I wrote down that fraction. How many people get have Ehlers-Danlos syndrome? How many people get pot syndrome and everything, and all the other diagnoses that I was, given, or I self given, I think, maybe in some cases, like Lyme disease or something. um but it was astronomical. I don't even remember what that number turned out to be, but the chances of me having all these things was like 1 in trillions and trillions, right? So there's no way. There had to be some root cause here that I was missing, because that just didn't make sense that I was that unlucky. so yeah, that's where testing can get really out of control, is that you rack up diagnoses and you rack up a lot of numbers, and how are they really helping you at the end of the day? So that's why we only do a few tests, and that's why we're able to work even without the blood tests in a lot of cases of international clients as well, because we know it's important.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah, I was willing to drive to the US. I might still, just for the geekiness and the scienciness of it. By the way, I always felt like the medical system were such vampires when I was going through my cancer treatments. Not really, well, not that I didn't know better. I just felt like it was my last resort, maybe a little bit like you. And they took blood from me every single week, every single week. And I finally said to them, like, so how's my big C showing up in my blood? And they're like, oh, well, your big C doesn't actually have a marker in the blood. And I'm like, what are you taking my blood for? This is over. I just said, this is over. Get away from me, you vampires. Anyway, I've just had to vent a little bit there. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah, so I appreciate hearing that so much. It can feel like, not to say anybody's entrapping. It's just, it can feel like a trap where you're in this rabbit hole of like, oh, this went up and that went down, and then the whole psychological, spiritual side of that, which I would like to get to a little bit later. Now, you mentioned the word Epstein-Barr, and that sparks me because I was after my cancer treatments. I can't say that word too. I went through a major knock 'em down shingles event. I ended up back in the hospital. That's my own fault. I went there. They stuck me on antivirals. It was my homeopath broke me out of the hospital. She's like, "You're leaving. Get out of there. Those drugs are terrible for you." But what have you noticed with that family of viruses, and given all the things around germ theory, and what do you make of it now?
Well, I gotta admit, my skepticism as viruses started, even during my schooling here. I just even during my schooling, I didn't quite. I mean, I understood how viruses supposedly worked and everything, and I just didn't understand how the body couldn't, in many cases, protect itself against those. And how they're just swirling in the air, and all they are is a little protein and a little DNA, and somehow they're making people so sick when your body is so good at fighting things off. And how can they make people sick constantly too, if you've already experienced them, and supposedly your body is trained after 2 weeks to make antibodies, and it should be gone by then. How does this thing that doesn't even have a metabolism come to make people really sick? um and then there's the exosome theory, that people think that viruses are what's called exosomes. And this is funny too, because when I started hearing about exosomes, I don't even remember hearing them about in school about them in school. Maybe I did. I don't recall. But anyways, it seemed like a new concept too. But some people think that what viruses are is a little tiny messenger that's supposed to stay in your body and tell your other cells how to, this is kind of a last resort thing, but to tell your cells to give instructions to your other cells. It's not supposed to be going from person to person to, um maybe it does within families a little bit or something, or they're more on sync energetically. But that's probably the most likely thing that I've heard, is that that's what's going on. It's this little cellular packet of instructions that go to other cells, or this cell's going to die, it needs to send out a message, like, like a smoke signal, like, watch out, here's the warning, because that's all it can do. It can't really, it needs to fall on the grenade essentially, and take itself out before it takes out the remaining cells. So that's the closest thing I can come up with. And all these different various quote unquote instructions that the cells are sending out, scientists maybe have just been misidentifying those and calling them different all these different names and putting all these numbers on them and calling them this variant or that variant, when in fact they're just instructions that our cells are designed to do as a last resort to help us stay upright and to address some of the many toxins that come into us, because so many toxins, so many chemicals these days. There's got to be a lot of instruction manuals, right, for how to deal with all of these. So that's my thinking there. That's what makes the most sense to me.
Right. Yeah, that family of viruses is a strange one, if it is well named or not. But it has a relationship with the nervous system, unlike, say, I think you guys call it the coof, and all of those other things that are, say, what I would feel to be more obviously detoxing. But I notice the nervous system isn't something necessarily talked about a whole lot in the Love Your Liver course. Do you think there's any relationship there, or anything more about that and that stupid
I
family of
think
viruses?
I think the EBV and medical medium, he's probably the most famous for talking about this particular virus, but he it is something that shows up in a lot of chronically people that are very ill. And it's I don't like to say this very often because it often gets abused, but correlation is not causation. Like, just because these people are really sick and they happen to have this certain marker that's found in their blood, they have an antibody, which I think should be thought of more as an antitoxin. They have this certain common antitoxin in their blood. So and supposedly this is something that especially affects the nerves and makes people really tired too, which can have to do with the nervous system and induces sick behavior in the brainstem, in the lower brainstem. So when we have certain types of inflammation in that nervous system, we get tired, we slow down, we kind of slow our metabolism. It's the sick response. Like, pretty much all symptoms of a cold are not from the detox itself, but your body's reaction to it, right? It's your body putting out all that mucus. It's your body that's telling you that you're tired right now, you need to rest. It's your body that's trying to have that tickle in your throat. It's your body that makes that in response to the toxin you're trying to get out, to expel it out. Or the itch that you're feeling, it's your body trying to, if you scratch it, it's your body trying to increase blood flow. And I know they say, like, don't pick at your chicken pox or something, but there's got to be a reason why histamine itches, right? Maybe that's a mechanical way of getting more blood to the area to detox faster, right? So where was I going with this? So yeah, it does have to do with the nervous system. And to that end too, is that as I'm thinking more about like the mental components of healing, and I've been learning more about polyvagal theory. I think I'm saying that right. And
Polyvagal.
yeah, polyvagal. Okay, that's it. And I'm seeing where I still need to do some work that's not necessarily just avoiding this or toxins and taking these supplements. And I'm seeing some stuff about the nervous system too. So I think that stuff's very interesting. So absolutely, I think the nervous system, which includes the brain, of course, it's important to address that too, because if that's a hindrance, if you're constantly stressed, that is going to make you that might keep you sick. That might keep you in a pattern, and patterns, tend to stay in our body too. So we have to address that. And when we have less toxicity, it's easier to get rid of those patterns. But it's still a component that I think people might want to look into, especially if they're not having the results that they're desiring.
Yeah, good. I'm glad you're thinking along those lines, and that's my whole subject. I was bragging that I was able to get rid of an obvious toxic bile dump that caused a migraine and nausea. I was able to get rid of it just by deprogramming. I had another one recently on a kind of retracing event, and it took a lot longer. I was still able to do it though, and didn't need to, or didn't turn to any painkillers or anything like that. So it was pretty amazing just to see that I could tell what was happening in my body for a change, right? Like otherwise it seems like such a big mystery all the time. I want to go back to something you said about itching, because I recently have taken, I never in my life had been in a tanning spa, and I don't really care about tanning so much anymore. But because of the UVBs, and we're basically divorced from the sun for the next 6 months. That's more or less how it goes here in Canada. And so I joined a tanning spa, and I just went twice. It was very enjoyable, loved it. But guess what? I ended up burning, and now, ever since I got pregnant with my son almost 18 years ago now, I have broken out. If I burn, the sun doesn't do this normally, but if I get too much and I burn, then it breaks out in a very itchy rash, and just kind of screams for your attention. It screams to be scratched, right? Like there's something. So, do you think that's? I guess there's like, I don't know. Is this even a question worth asking? You anything more you want to say about that when the skin is so not
Yeah.
painful, but
Yeah.
yeah.
I know what you mean, and it's hard to it's kind of different thinking about it that way. But did the sun cause that itching and that rash? It's like, well, kind of. It precipitated it. It helped. It rapidly oxidized toxins, and it did probably cause a little bit of DNA damage too. But people shouldn't worry about that so much. Your body is an expert at fixing that. It, and it's your reaction. It's those top cells saying, oh my gosh, I think we just had a little too much toxin exposure, because these toxins were broken down by the UV, and this DNA got a little wonky, and that's why you peel, right? So that these cells we talked about at apoptosis, and this is skin. It's meant to do this. This is not a big deal, but it says, you know what, the cells, guys, outer skin cells, we gotta just party's over. We gotta just die, right? So that's what's happened, is when you're peeling, that's your body just saying, you know what, we have too many toxins, we have a little bit too much DNA damage, we have to shed ourselves, right? Or desquamation is the scientific term, if you want to get fancy. Or that redness, that's your body bringing more blood into the area to clear that out and to clear out the damaged cells. The itching, the histamine response. I think if your nails aren't gross, and you don't have too terrible open wounds, if you want to scratch something, great. Like when I have a deep niacin flush, I love to dry brush with that. It feels so good. I love to just scratch it out. It feels great, and I think my body wants me to do that too, and that's why it's giving me that signal. So if your nails aren't gross and you don't have open wounds, I think that's okay to do, or at least slap it too. My mom used to tell me, when I got chicken pox, it was just slap it. You'll get some relief. Um, and so all of these reactions, even a sunburn, is your body reacting to toxins. And sometimes when toxins oxidize, a lot of detox pathways are oxidative. People always want to talk about antioxidants this and antioxidants that, but a lot of them are oxidative. So you're burning, essentially, because oxidation is just the fancy scientific term for burning. But a lot of these have to burn through, and sometimes they get more toxic at that stage before they're pushed out, and that's what some people have a hard time understanding. Like, let's take vitamin A, for instance, like or retinol, or no, let's go back further. Beta carotene, right? So beta carotene isn't terribly toxic, but as it goes through all those pathways, its endpoint is a cancer drug, but you still need to get it to that point, to that endpoint, to finally push it out too, because of beta carotene is hard to get out. It's very fatty, so it has to be in this acid form for you, oxidated, basically burned, for you to finally get it out. So that's what we think's happening there. And when we talk about the niacin flush, there's a lot of talk about what it is and what's going on. And Dr. Smith and I have kind of, it's still kind of up in the air in the science world. And you think, oh, niacin's been around for that long, they can't even understand the flush. And it seems like, no, they don't really understand it. What we think is that part of the flush, part of the itchy red feeling you get, is that niacin is helping power these detox enzymes suddenly, and your body can finally push some of these things that are stuck in the skin through the detox pathways, and that it's actually these compounds, these aldehydes or what have you, or these capsaicinoids or pepper-like compounds that, or poison ivy type plant compounds that are stuck in your skin that your body didn't really have another place to put them safely. They're going through the rapid detox, and that's why you kind of have that brief like aftershock before they're finally taken through the whole detox pathway and are able to be eliminated. So that's kind of what we think the flushing is, and burned. And we know that I have research about niacin topically preventing UV damage, and even preventing vitamin A toxicity when people do chemical peels with the retin-A or the tretinoins type stuff. Um, so niacin can actually be protective, even though it's briefly briefly flaring it. You're briefly getting the poison symptoms. It's going away. It's going all the way through finally. So yeah, that's how we feel about burns and niacin flushes too, if that makes sense.
Yes, a great segue into the niacin, and so I was able to make myself flush in a nice mild way. I remember back in the day, somebody's like, "Here's a niacin," so I pop it, and then I'm like, "Oh, big regret." And I hear some people take themselves to the hospital because they just don't understand what's happening. That it's such a, it's not hurting you by any means, but I could feel how some people might not consider that enjoyable, but I just felt like I could feel that it was aiding my skin because, there was all the tingling and like sort of a mild itchiness, but not one that made me want to rip my skin off or anything like that. And so, yeah, I feel good about it, which is not very sciencey. Um, since you've mentioned the topical niacin, what's the difference between using a supplement as in a topical form versus ingesting it? I know you've got a great live stream, you guys, on magnesium that goes into massive detail. So I really would encourage anyone here to go at the YouTube Nutrition Detective channel and take that in. It's very worthwhile. I think I've listened to 2.5 or 3 times already. But overall, can you show the difference between the topical and the ingested, if there's any thing that you can generalize there? And I think you're muted, Kelsey, just in case you don't know. So you just have to hit that bottom button that says.
Okay.
There you are. Yes.
Okay. I think what people need to realize with the difference between topical and taking something orally, and I often say this, I'm like, you might as well hit it on both ends, especially if you're having a skin problem or something else a little bit more specialized. But basically, whatever you're putting on your skin is also going to your body, and there's a whole spectrum of that. But think of your skin as like a waxier version of your guts, basically, of your intestines. So the absorption mechanics and what's going to absorb is a little bit different when it comes to skin, but people should be aware that, for better or for worse, what they're putting on their skin is going into their body to some degree. Now, fattier compounds, more ionic compounds or more acidic compounds, based on the pH, there's a lot of variability, tend to get in the skin easier. Niacin just by itself is not absorbed that well topically, but I think it goes to enough layers to kind of address this. Or when people are doing a niacin enema, let's say, I think in some cases it can help to get niacin on both sides, because certain tissues that are inflamed or they're detoxing, what they actually do when you look at the research papers is that they're actually sending little tiny, I guess they can be thought of molecular nets looking for niacin. They're like, we need some niacin over here where we have all this detoxing to do or something, and they can quadruple their niacin nets, so to speak. So it's kind of a triage that happens when people take niacin, is that it seems like it's intelligent or something. It seems to work on, different stuff and to prioritize what's bothering you in the body, but it's actually your body putting out more nets. Like I said, I think that's appropriate for niacin, and that's why it appears to cluster and appears to work. Like, for instance, they're having trouble with their knees or something, or their elbow, or there's a little inflammation, and they'll say they feel the flesh in the elbow. They'll see the redness in the elbow. They'll see the and then if you want to get more woo about it, more spiritual too, people even talk about seeing old childhood scars come out, old childhood wounds, where, like, I don't want to get too dark here, but so I'll just make this very generic, but maybe, I got a nice flesh in the place that my dad used to hit me with the wooden spoon. So it's just amazing how the body can store onto this information, and these cells are still crying out for to kind of be cleansed, whether that's energetically or of the toxins that they're holding on to, essentially. So yeah, I kind of got into the oral versus topical, but just, I think people need to be careful about what they're putting inside their bodies and outside. And in some cases, like when you have eczema or you have digestive issues, where it might be helpful to get an enema, because niacin, it's used so rapidly in the body and it's absorbed so quickly that it might not get down to those lower parts of the intestines. And if you're having an issue down there, you may want to do a niacin enema, which is kind of like a topical application, essentially, or by the time the niacin it's not getting in appropriate amounts to your skin to help your skin put these things through the entire detox pathway, like with eczema or something like that. So it may be helpful to do a little on top and kind of sandwich your problem area with some niacin, or with helpful, or for instance, sometimes we go the other way too, is where we want to absorb those toxins topically. So we do like charcoal poultices or something. So that's another way about thinking about it. And you can do both. I think they're both helpful. Either put in nutrients in to get something through the entire detox pathway, or just pull out toxins with a poultice, or taking charcoal orally kind of does that as well. Yeah.
Right on. That's good to know. And then, so if you had, say, like zinc is one that you guys recommend going really slow with, and I started on 25 milligrams, and my system kind of shut down, or my digestion shut down on that, so I had to back off with it. But I've been using it topically, like I said. So is it basically the same? Would that also cause the same kind of shutdown, or charcoal? If I've learned now what my minimum dose is that can, like, not cause my system to get all backed up. And so would it be the same for what I'm putting on my skin? Because I think of those as two different things. I was using like charcoal zinc poultice on the sun rash. And then I just started to wonder, like, is that interfering internally the same way as if I was ingesting so much of it? Because I used like a lot, actually, compared to what I would have taken orally.
Yeah, you make a good point. I didn't really address this with my last bit, but yes, so it does have a little bit different effects if you take something topical. So when you take something orally, most compounds, everything has to go through your liver first. And we talk about toxic bile theory, and if it's hitting your liver first, then you may have more symptoms associated with that. If it's absorbed topically and it's just going straight to the blood without passing through the liver first, yeah, you can have different effects, and some people can tolerate that differently, right? So, for instance, I also had trouble taking zinc, and I still do. I still try to watch that one, and I know that it's something that can aggravate my symptoms. But topically, I was doing okay with it. So for some reason, if the zinc hits my liver first and I take too much, I'm gonna have a bad time. If I put the zinc on topically, I have a lot more wiggle room, and I can take more and feel okay. For instance, when I was So I'm very lucky. Like when I get what we call a bile dump, when my toxic bile comes out too quick for this or that reason, I don't get pain. I don't get I don't get a headache or anything. It's not that bad. I just get tired. So I just get sickness behavior. Basically, I think is what's going on. That's my reaction. My body goes, oh my gosh, we got a lot of toxins at once. You need to go lie down. So basically, if I take too much zinc, I need to hit the bed basically and take a long nap. So I'm lucky in that way that that's pretty tolerable for me. As long as my kids are don't need or something that I can do that. But yeah, a lot of people have different effects. But when I was experimenting with making some zinc bracelets, or like when I was working with the zinc niacinate in the lab and I was like inhaling a little bit too much, of course I wore a mask and everything, but if I did get a little bit by inhalation, I could definitely feel that. Or if I wore a zinc bracelet for too long, then of course it's going to reach the liver and you're going to have, too much of that. So it is a different profile. And a lot of people, things that they don't tolerate orally, they can tolerate topically. Is what I think I'm getting at. It's just, there's no way to say how much is absorbed of anything. So that topical stuff, if you're doing topical stuff to try to have systemic effects and systemic detox, that's a lot more of an intuitive thing that everybody kind of needs to figure out and rock for themselves. So yeah, I hope that answered your question.
It really does. That helps so much. Yeah. Back to my mad scientist. I'll keep going there. You talked about enemas, and I think I've asked directly on another live stream. There's 2 other interviews, by the way, with Garrett Smith here, and a third one coming up in December as well, specifically on women's health. And but when it comes to enemas, is that something that you've used on a regular basis? I think Dr. Garrett says it's not necessary to go through this like unpleasant experience some people have, but honestly, I feel like it's helped me so much to move, what could be potentially way quicker to detox. And you must know, like, the whole coffee enema craze it's not new by any means, but you could go back to the Gerson method. They were recommending for like really sick people, I think it was once every 4 hours, crazy amounts of coffee enemas. I noticed in your niacin article that you talk about that there actually is a small amount of niacin in the coffee, and it's probably why you end up getting good effects from the coffee enema. Are there ways that, like, the coffee enema is just simply not healthy? It's creating toxicity, and that it would be better to swap out for niacin?
Yeah, so coffee, I wasn't aware of this because I was never much of a coffee drinker, but coffee does have a lot of mold in it, and of course most of it does. I don't know about organic and heirloom and everything, but it does seem to have some mold. So you may be potentially be putting mold spores in a more direct way in your body, where it's not really meant to be, where you don't really have the acids and enzymes to break them down properly. A lot of people will if they run out of veins or something, some drug users will eventually turn to putting things rectally. So it is a way to absorb stuff. Of course, it's going to absorb more than your skin will. It does go to the liver, and the blood, both directly almost. So that can have a different profile. But the problem with coffee is that it has a little bit of nicotinic acid. It has a little bit of niacin, but it also has a lot of polyphenols, which can kind of kick niacin out of where it's supposed to be, because they have a somewhat similar structures. So it's kind of like musical chairs. If a polyphenol is where niacin is supposed to be, and the niacin passes by just, on the lazy river that is your blood, then the niacin doesn't get to work because that other compound was stuck there. So it kind of negates itself in that way. Also, what we think is some of the beneficial effects of that happen when people take coffee enemas is it is dumping a lot of bile. That's true. So you're having like a release valve there and a release of toxicity because it's stimulating that, you know, ejection response, essentially, like, whoa, this is toxic, we got to get this out really quick. So you can have, piled up. So if people want to do that, okay, but I think people need to understand like why they're doing it, and that maybe niacin would be a better option, and that possibly a lot of the benefits that supposedly come from coffee enemas are related to that little bit of niacin that's in there too. So and you need so much less. So when I wrote this recipe, I tried to make it super simple because, people that, feel like they can benefit from enemas, like, gosh, I might have like played with this phase in the parasite, when I got into parasites briefly or something, that little kick. But gosh, the cleaning and the tubes and the buckets and the tips and everything, it's just a nightmare, especially if you're chronically ill, and that's just so much work. So I tried to make it as easy as possible. It's just, 4 to 8 ounces of water, and it's literally a disposable. You buy off the shelf and you dump it out and you put niacin water in there basically, and then you throw it away afterwards. And I come up with that based on a study that I had saw, and they say a picture is 1,000 words, but and that's why I like the pictures on this study, because it showed the before and after of people taking the same dose of niacin in only 4 ounces of water for a few months, and it completely healed their guts. They looked absolutely squeaky clean and beautiful after that. So there is some benefit, certainly to enemas, and if people want to go down that road, I just wanted to make it easy for them. And coffee enemas, gosh, you have to brew the coffee, you have to wait for it to cool down. And again, like that cleaning, like all those tubes and all those tips and everything, and the time it takes to do that, and especially if you're tired, if you're chronically ill and you're dealing with a lot of fatigue, like who can keep up with that? And you're only, if you're doing a health practice, you're only gonna really, for most things, you're gonna feel better from the stuff that you make a habit or you do regularly. And it's just, I think it's tough for people to do that with coffee enemas. So that's how I feel about diluted healing. So if people want to do that, or get some of, at least some or most of the benefits of coffee enema, I just made a niacin enema recipe that I think is really accessible to a lot of people and has a lot of great benefits and some science behind it too.
I'm all over it. That's amazing. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, I needed to know, because I did notice that the coffee, works better than no coffee. And now I know why it probably works. And I did try some niacin already, and I seem to have had very good results. So thank you for that recipe. It is in the Love Your Liver course. If anybody's interested in getting that course, which I do recommend, I'm still cautious because I'm in the beginning of my process, but I don't. Education never hurts, let's say. So you can just go to nutritiondetective.com. I've shared a link here in the chat, and the value is fantastic. You get access for an entire year, and not just to the information, but to the whole community, which to me is priceless. So many things. Can we talk about, I don't know how your time is, but can we talk about how the kidneys function in detox? Because the entire focus is on as the course is named, Love Your Liver. And so are the kidneys actually detox organs or not? What's showing up in the urine? And then with respect to the whole urine therapy craze, what are your takes on that?
So yes, I believe they are detox organs. So if something can't be dealt with by your liver, or your liver is so overloaded that, or scarred, or in trouble that it's leaking bile into the blood, then then the next catcher, basically the next player on the field, is your kidneys, and so they are detoxing. And we know that to be true, because when people have kidney failure, they can get really sick. They can start to crystallize ammonia and look terrible, and they have to go on these machines. So yes, they're absolutely detox organs. Not quite as immediately critical as the liver, because if you didn't have a liver, you know, if it just completely shut off, you wouldn't be around for even an hour, really. But you know, your kidneys, you might have a week. You know, some dialysis patients have to go in every week or two or something like that, I think it is. But yeah, they're detox organs. They're filtering. They're dealing with your salt to water concentration. They're sensitive to toxins and hormones. You know, Grant Genereux talks about how his you know, he healed his late stage kidney disease by eliminating vitamin A and essentially getting on, you know, an early, very, very basic version of the liver diet. So yes, but the problem essentially does start in the liver, and that's where the toxic bile is. That's, you know, has to be passed over to the kidneys if the liver couldn't compensate. So a lot of people can see some kidney symptoms, and you know, UTIs, or you know, like POTS is somewhat related, like that tachycardia condition that I had earlier. That's a little bit related to the kidneys and hormones. So they are they are certainly a detox organ and a player in that. And if bile is leaking out of the liver, then yes, it will hit the kidneys, and it can affect your water balance. And your blood is very important too, and they're dealing with your blood directly. So they are another part of it, essentially. Yeah. And people can see healing in that. I have research about niacin, and you know, even in the medical field, I didn't know this, but this must be kind of like an open secret that's a lot of doctors are treating some kidney issues with baking soda and niacin, kind of just like what we're doing too. It just doesn't seem to be talked about a lot too. But yeah, if you heal your liver first, your kidneys will see improvement as well, because they won't have to do so much work.
Right. And then, so what's your take on urine therapy? People who drink their own urine as a health practice.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good question. I think Dr. Smith has more to say about this, so I'm just going to summarize what he says about it, and I tend to agree, is that people are probably, if they're doing urine therapy either topically or orally, they're probably, maybe there's something of a homeopathic effect for toxins that are very in very low concentrations in there. So maybe it's having that. Maybe that some of those proteins, you know, people who are sick put a lot of protein in their blood. Maybe some of those proteins are binding onto toxins, so when they re-ingest them, somehow they can reuse those proteins and grab onto toxins as well. There may be some psychoactive things that are coming out of the urine too that can make people think they're feeling good. They may be re-intoxing themselves and kind of shutting their detox too, if they're, you know, because of course certain toxins can do that too. Certain toxins shut off your detox pathways, so they can make people feel better temporarily, but it's very problematic, and it doesn't seem like a cure-all at all. And I just, if this stuff were good for you, I think your body would be smart enough to hold on to it and not be pushing it out like that. That's what it boils down to, is trusting your body that it knows what it's supposed to eliminate. And they make the argument of, well, you know, a plant needs its own, you know, its leaves fall and it needs its own leaves to make compost. It's like, okay, but they don't have organs, and that's kind of different, and it's kind of adapted to do this. But you have adapted to clean your blood constantly, and you know, and your body should know what to do it. And people will say, oh, it's so ancient, and the Indians do it and everything, and it's your own perfect medicine. I think people need to understand is that ancient doesn't always equal authentic. And there's a lot of stuff that's even very old methods of healing that are it doesn't mean it's secret or hidden away or very true or very wise, because there's a lot of information even in history. So even Ayurvedic formulas, and when you think about this too, just to be a little crass, is that, if all that stuff works so well, shouldn't those ancient people still be alive, right? Like they all tend to end up in the same place as everybody else did in history. So it seems like, in general, or at least what we know about this, the human race hasn't gotten quite everything right yet to be able to, be above all types of illnesses too. So I think that's what's going on with urine therapy. I know people can have some benefits, but I think it's either placebo, homeopathic, or they're recycling proteins that bind compounds, or they're shutting off their detox because they just took in toxins that they were just trying to get out. So that's kind of what I think is going on there.
I appreciate hearing that so much. Thank you. Thank you.
Mhm.
Yeah, I've gone back and forth. I actually had a naturopath when I was sick with the big C, and he put me on urine therapy, and I honestly didn't notice anything. I've noticed, and like, having tried it more in the near future, there were times where I thought I noticed something, but that we're all looking to get away from the so-called symptoms of whatever it is, and as soon as you don't have those symptoms, you think you're healed, and it's just not the truth, right? It means that your body's not detoxing anymore, or you're healed. It could be both, I guess.
Yeah, that's such a hard thing to get around and to convince some people of, is that if they're feeling better, it's not necessarily a good thing. If you're taking herbs, you think, oh, the herbs are healing me. It's healthy. In a lot of cases, they just, shut off your detox, or your body recognized that this was such a toxic compound. Like, whoa, we don't even want to deal with this yet. Or it initiates a bile dump. Like, it senses that it's so toxic that it has to basically, press the big red button and just flush it all out. But people think, oh, it's so cleansing, right? So it's really how you look at it too. And this was what's, I think, was so difficult about the IV medication. The horse stuff is another way to put it, is that it did make people feel better. It did. I'm not going to lie. It did get some people out of the hospital. That's true. But it's because that doesn't mean it's a miracle drug. It was slowing those people's detox so much that they stopped those reactions and the snot and mucus and trouble breathing, that it made them feel better. Also, it's a bit of a opioid and GABA receptor, which relates to alcohol. So people were feeling very less stressed, right? A little bit drunk, and they felt like they weren't as sick. So they were getting out of the hospital in that way too. And they can have pain relief at the time. So that's what was so hard, is because people saw so many testimonials about this horse stuff, this IV working for people, and no follow-up after that. They were just seeing these testimonials and these chats, and you could get the impression that this was a miracle drug if you didn't know what it was actually doing inside of you. So yeah, I think that's a hard thing for people to get around, is that feeling better does not always equal better health.
Yeah, that's a really good one to wrap your head around. Thank you for that. I appreciate it. Let's see if there's anything else that I had brought up around. I think we kind of talked about nearly everything that I had on my list. And there was one question from before. Let's see. What did I say I was going to ask about? If someone could, oregano oil. Somebody's asking. Obviously, I would say obviously not in the Love Your Liver stream yet, because I've heard Dr. Garrett talk out about against it being one of those classic antioxidants. And I'll just say personally, I took it religiously. Every time I'd get some symptom of detox come up, I'd start the oregano oil. And then there came a point where it's like, never again am I going to, I could get past the bad taste, but my body just knew never again taking that. So do you want to take a minute, since the question is there?
Yeah, we can talk about oregano oil in particular. So, there'll even be some studies where they'll put oregano oil on a plate, and I saw some, I don't know, it was some kid got a science award because he had this infection thing, and his science fair project was he put a little bit of oregano oil, and I guess his parents were doctors, so they had some antibiotics. He put some antibiotics in this, bacterial plate and he put some antibiotics in this, and the oregano oil worked the very best out of all these antibiotics. And you think, wow, it's so natural, and yet it worked better than all these pharmaceutical antibiotics. And it's just, that's not necessarily a good thing. That may mean it's just more toxic than those other ones, and that may be actually a bad thing. We have to remember that plants make these compounds again to deter bugs. So why are certain plants easier to grow? Like, why is it really easy to grow tomatoes? Why is it really easy to grow oregano and basil? Everybody can do it, even if you have a terrible green thumb experience. It's because those plants make so many compounds that deter pests. And those, you can look at those beautiful basil leaves and you don't have to spray anything on them, and somehow they're just fine, and you can put them in your pesto. And those contain carvacol, which is what's in oregano oil, but same kind of compounds. But those are pesticides, and a lot of things that are antibiotics are also insecticides. Ivermectin, again, they spray it on, or IV, they spray it on crops. I said it again. As well as being, something that can kill bacteria. So I think when people hear the term antibiotic, they should count themselves in that group too, because you are life. Like, antibiotic literally just means anti-life.
Life.
So you are taking something that's anti-life, and it can be something that can have a very broad spectrum. And you should be wary, if something kills a bug, it can also kill you. Now, you don't have a blood-brain barrier like a bug. They don't have as strong livers as many detox organs. They weren't designed for that. They have very short lives. We're designed for very long lives. So we need, we have more protection. We're not going to feel this immediate effects. So a bug can eat, a pesticide or an IV type compound that has been sprayed on the crops, because it doesn't have a blood-brain barrier, that protects you, most toxins from entering the brain, because your brain is obviously very important, and your body does a little bit, extra care keeping that safe from toxins. It doesn't mean it's good for you. So the bug will die. You may not immediately die, but it doesn't mean it's good for you. That toxicity is going to build up, and you're going to get sick eventually. The blood-brain barrier, as you get sicker and more toxic, can break down even, and now your brain is exposed to even more toxins. So I think I think that's something that we need to be careful of, is when people say, oh, this works better with than antibiotics, we can't just assume that means that it's safer. So yeah, that's what I have to say about that.
Very good. I appreciate that. And I found the other question about, how did you heal your teeth? If you don't mind saying a little bit about that.
Sure. So my mom is a dentist. So I was taking unbuffered niacin, so just niacin straight out of the bag, like bags of nicotinic acid. And even though niacin is super great and I love it so much, is that it is an acid, so it did wear away at my teeth. And that's kind of how I went down the rabbit hole of rediscovering and learning that we had to buffer it like we do with aspirin. Well, I don't do aspirin, but you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. They have buffered aspirin, they have buffered vitamin C, etc. So I learned to do that. But before that, I was taking quite a bit of niacin straight, and just because of the fact that it was acidic, it did start to wear some holes in my teeth, and I wasn't really paying attention. I was having so many benefits, and it didn't hurt or anything, but I did demineralize my teeth. It was very embarrassing having to go to my mother to start filling some of the worst ones that were more immediate. But I did start to work on the project of remineralizing my teeth too. And Dr. Smith just, I helped him write an article that's in the Love Your Liver program now about how to do that if you want to get into more of the specifics. But, you know, we talk about things that, that don't normally, people don't normally talk about when it comes to this, and what needs to be required for demineralization, and how do you do that when you're still detoxing and the compounds are still going from your blood into your saliva, because saliva is basically filtered blood, right? So if the bile is in your blood and those toxic compounds are in your blood, then they're going to get into your saliva too. So how do you address that? For instance, if you have iron, iron excess or something, eventually too much iron is going to get in your mouth and can cause some staining, right? Like a toilet bowl ring or something. So we have to address all those issues of how you're detoxing and your saliva and what your teeth are kind of bathing in, because your teeth are kind of in a 2 steps forward, 2 steps back maybe, or they're in a constant flux of demineralization and remineralization. So we want to get, every time we chew food or eat something, put stress on our teeth or grind, or anytime you have dry mouth too, or some bacteria, there's too much bacteria or something, or toxin accumulation, where you're going towards a demineralizing state. And when you're doing the right things, when you have enough saliva, when you have enough calcium and phosphate just kind of in the soup in your saliva and in the right form, and your gums are healthy and can nourish these tissues, then you're going to progress more towards remineralization. So we talk about that, and it's interesting. The number one side effect of all drugs, is dry mouth too.
Right.
And yes. So if you're toxic, you're going to have dry mouth. So a lot of people in this program have been toxic for a while and have started to get tooth problems for that too, just because, for the very fact that they don't have enough saliva, that their teeth can have remineralization, can have, think of it like a geode or a crystal in a cave, or a stalactite or stalagmite is over time to get recrystallization, which is essentially what this is, or remineralization. Those compounds, that calcium and everything has to be there to assemble basically on your teeth, and it is a constant, wearing and rebuilding process. So I think that's something that's a little important to a lot of people. That's something that Dr. Smith and I have been working hard for a while, and he just put out an article too about how to do that. We're working on products to aid that process and that are aligned with our values of low intoxing and everything, and research backed and science use. So yeah, I think that's I don't remember what the original question was, but yeah, it's something we do, and it's something you can find help for in the Love Your Liver program, and we're also working on products. Yeah.
Brilliant. Yeah, you answered the question. And could I just follow up also? One of the very first things in the course it shows you is, if you've got mercury in your mouth, get it out. And I found out amazingly that my own dentist, who I have a lot of respect and love for, and she's just awake and she's a total researcher. I think she would love you, by the way. You guys are a lot alike. And so it turns out she will take my fillings out. Do you have any guidance around that for people? Like, should they, just because you have it, should you run and get it out? Or do you want to look and see if you've got signs of mercury poisoning, which we probably all do, and just,
Yeah, it's very likely if you have too much mercury in your system. If you do have those fillings, it does it's essentially, it's a liquid metal, so it's more soluble, and it's eventually gonna get into your body. And even a hair test is not testing for that type of mercury, as I'm understanding. So I think people can pretty much assume that if they have mercury fillings, they have mercury toxicity, and not to scare anybody too, but and they may or not have not reached that threshold where it's it's really bothering them, but it's something that Dr. Smith says is a really big hindrance. And he even says this, he's honest, is like, if it, you know, if the choice is between getting a consult with me or getting your fillings out, you need to do the fillings, or you're not going to have, you know, as much success as you like with this program, because that can be a real hindrance to detox. When I was, oh my gosh, I can't believe this, but when I was, you know, younger and I was spending summers working for my mom as her dental assistant, or summers or holidays, we used to take out fillings all the time and replace them with resin, or, you know, crowns or ceramics or what have you. You know, at least once a day we were taking out some of these mercury fillings, and we had no protection. So it was just, you know, it was just normal math, right? Like, I don't know, I guess, you know, we didn't know to do that. And it doesn't even seem like that long ago. So it's kind of weird to me when I was a teenager, you know, just doing this and just having this flimsy mask. But yeah, you want to make sure, if you're going to do this, is to, you can do charcoal beforehand too. I think Dr. Smith might have more tips on this, and then charcoal after, just to get anything. It sounds like your dentist knows what they're doing, and they're probably going to put, you know, dental dams on you. They're going to, you know, get you some fresh air. They're going to make sure they're protecting themselves as well. But yeah, anytime you're taking something out, there's going to be a little, you know, dust on the construction site. So you should just, I think it would be good to be aware of that. Take some charcoal or zeolite, lots of water, things like that too. But yeah, I think, but we're pretty sure that overall, this is the better thing to do, is that it's worth that little bit of dust that your body may have to deal with, rather than having this constant stream of mercury going into your system. So yeah,
All right.
that's all.
It really helps me. Yeah. Very selfish question there. And so if I did 7 in a row, how long would you space those out, or do you think they could be just all taken out at one time?
I think Dr. Smith might be able to answer this question better, because I think he's seen, you know, I know about this stuff, and I have experience in the dental field, but I think he's seen more of what happens to people as they're doing this process. So he probably just has more data for you to know whether you want to space them out or just do them all at once. So I'd probably ask him. Yeah, I'm sure he'd be happy to answer that.
And no doubt my dentist also will have some recommendations. So thank you very much for that.
Okay.
Yeah. This has been a fantastic interview, Kelsey. I was so excited when you accepted the invitation. I really respect your knowledge, your science mind, your badassness, also just your willingness to speak out and call that spade a spade. I did share articles, or pardon me, the times when you were giving the talks on Garrett's channel to both. I shared the channel. Here's the channel link, so you can learn so much, like Kelsey said, just from the weekly live streams on Tuesdays. I believe that's coming up tomorrow. And then this specifically on the methylene blue, and the last one on the IV, which I just really highly recommend looking into if you have any idea that, oh, well, there's a time for these things. And it's like, no, you need to really understand the dangers there. So I appreciate your work there. And anything else that you'd like to share before we start closing for the day?
No, that's all. Thank you so much for having me on. And I look forward to looking more into what you do too. So yeah,
fantastic. Thanks. Yeah. Maybe we'll get a chance to connect on that. And then coming up December 16th, Garrett's coming on, as I mentioned, to talk about women's health particularly. It'll be, menstruation to pregnancy to birth to menopause, and all of the sideways knowledge that we've received around hormones and all of that kind of thing. The beauty is that when it comes down to it, the cure for everything is more or less the same, like stop intoxing and get the needed nutrients that your body is lacking. So that's actually really beautiful. It's not every time you go down, he had a great video on muscular sclerosis, I believe. Very sciencey, very intense, but the same answers on the other side. So it really is helping me to simplify things. And love you guys a lot. Thank you everyone for coming. Thanks for sharing out, Garrett in particular, and everybody else. if you want to share this with somebody. And I know it's radical, right? When I remember when I started first opening my fridge after I listened to, it was Alex X interview of Garrett. And then I just felt sad every time I opened the fridge because it's full of like vibrant green vegetables. And I was a greenaholic. I would be juicing at least 3 times a week, heavy on the cilantro, thinking this is all good for my health. And so it was a major adjustment. But at the end of the day, I saw like my tastes have changed now. I couldn't even eat a meal without garlic and onions. And now it's a major time saver. And I don't even like them anymore. I actually have lost my taste. Same thing with all the spices. Now, the only seasoning I use is salt. That would be like deadly for someone like me. I'm a real foodie, and pleasure through food is important to me. But I am enjoying my meals. It's really fantastic. So just to let people know, yes, it's an adjustment, but not an unhappy experiment on my part by any means. All right. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for joining. Thank you, Kelsey, again, and I look forward to working with you guys and seeing you more in the forum. Thank you, everyone, for joining. I'm going to play us out with my son, who was doing the starter video that you saw. If you'd like to sub to him, he is on YouTube as well. I don't know. I always manage to not pull that link up fast enough, but I will make sure I get it to you. It is in the show notes. That's one place you can get it very, very quickly. All right, everyone, have a beautiful rest of your day. Thanks again, Kelsey, for being here.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.